Hey everybody, and welcome to your favorite podcast, the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast with yours truly, the company's expert. And today we're going to be talking about why posted jobs are already filled. So if ever you have seen a job that was posted and you applied for it, only to find out that they had actually selected an internal candidate before they even posted the job publicly, then you know what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about why this happens and what you can do about it. Also, in today's episode, we're going to talk about how to be a good manager. Now, both of these topics were questions that were sent in to me by my awesome listeners and awesome viewers, and I want to thank them for that. So, without any further ado, let's go to our first topic, okay? Why posted jobs are already filled. That's right, they were filled if you come from the Pacific Islands. For the rest of us, they were filled. Okay. So this was actually not sent in via a comment on a YouTube video, which is what happens 99% of the time. This was actually sent in to me via email. And normally I don't take unsolicited questions by email, but I'm making an exception in this case because I like the topic. But I have to keep this person's name confidential. We'll call them Mr. X. How about that? Okay, so Mr. X says, "Hi, Bill. A buddy turned me on to your YouTube channel about 6 months ago. I really enjoyed watching the videos on interviewing." Well, thank you very much, Mr. X. "I work in the K-12 education space as a consultant." Okay, so that's kindergarten to grade 12 or 12th grade education space. "It is an unspoken truth that 80 to 90% of the job postings for positions above the classroom teacher, like admin or consultant, etc., are already spoken for. And the posting and interview process is being done for optics and or to meet union or government mandates. Is there a way to flush out if a job opening is legitimate or if it is already spoken for? There have been a few opportunities in the past that I would put the proper amount of time and effort into researching, interview prep, and interviewing, only to learn that the hiring organization has someone in mind and the entire process was for show. Thanks, Mr. X." Okay, well, this is an excellent question. I want to thank Mr. X for sending that in. Let's talk about this. Listen. This is absolutely true, and this happens a lot more than people care to admit. In a lot of government institutions, this is a thing, and even in the private sector, this is also a thing, even though, there might be less regulations requiring them to do this. In cases where you have a unionized workforce, this is done, and it's very hard to prove that they're abusing this. Because, how you would have to sort of be a mind reader and know what's in the hiring manager's mind. Sometimes people are careless and they openly discuss this. They talk about, the fact that they've selected somebody. They talk about this freely and openly. And also, they signal through their actions that they have in fact done this. Okay, so which means they have selected a person, perhaps internally, before they post the job publicly. And just like Mr. X says here, they are mandated either through government rules in the case of government institutions or union rules in the case of a unionized workforce that they must post the job publicly. And this is a sort of anti-nepotism type countermeasure. And the problem is that they go through the motions and they post it publicly and they canvass candidates. They make a short list of candidates and they bring those people in to interview. And unbeknownst to the candidates, the hiring manager has already selected an internal candidate. And the way this works is that they can select the internal candidate. Usually, there's absolutely nothing preventing them from doing that as long as they have supposedly gone to the public and seen if there are any other more qualified candidates available. And the problem with this process, at least in my experience, is that more qualified is a very, very flexible term. So, even though you canvass publicly, you could come in with candidates that have more experience or more education, but you can always find an excuse to hire the internal candidate. You can sometimes say that the internal candidate's education or experience is much more pertinent, much more relevant. Or you can always fall back on the oh so elusive, they're just a better fit. They understand our culture. Okay, you didn't get that vibe from the people that you interviewed. So this is often done, it's often abused. Now, I share your frustration, Mr. X. There's nothing more annoying than applying for a job and doing all this prep work just to find out that it was over before it began. Okay, I mean, nobody wants to do this. You know, you want to schedule that kind of work for February 31st. You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's such a disappointment and a complete waste of your time to apply for these jobs and put all the mental and physical energy into it and then realize that the deck was completely stacked against you and it wasn't an open, fair process, which it should be by law sometimes. Yes, this is done quite prevalently. Now, okay, let me explain kind of what's sort of going on behind the scenes here. Now, I'm not justifying this, but I'm attempting to explain it in such a way that hopefully everybody can understand why this happens. And if we understand why it happens, then we can talk about what the solution is. Okay, so here's the deal. I've mentioned this before. Usually when a hiring manager wants to hire somebody, they first realize, okay, I need to hire an extra body. Okay, this person is going to report to them and they have the authority to do this. Okay, they look in 4 places. Okay, 4 standard places. And in order, those places are, number 1, they first think, is there anybody I know that would be a suitable candidate? Because if you're the hiring manager and you happen to know somebody that, you know, would be able to do this job and they'd be willing to do the job and they're available to do the job, a lot of times it doesn't really have to go any further than that. Okay. Now, if you're in the private sector, if you're in a smaller organization, when I say small, I mean anything under 1,000 people in this case, usually that's where this process ends. You hire the person you know, and there you go. Now, if you work in a larger organization, or if you work in a more regulated organization, either by unions or by some kind of watchdog organization, you may have to post the job. But let's face it, if you know someone that would be qualified for this job, they would be a fit for this job, you know, and you already have a working relationship with them, then chances are they're probably going to work out. So you don't need to look any further. Okay. And let's face it, that's the person you want to hire. Okay. Because if you get to choose who you hire, you know, and you could choose them, that's probably the person you'd want to go with instead of a stranger. So if the answer is yes, do I know anyone who could do this job? Usually that's the person that gets hired and the process stops there. Okay. In the case of these situations, they may choose to post the job publicly anyway, just to show that they're going through the motions, but that's where it stops. Now, let's say the answer is no. Let's say the hiring manager thinks, okay, is there anyone I know that could do this? And the answer is no, I can't think of anyone that will be able to do this. The second place they look is there an internal candidate? Is there somebody that we could promote into this job, or we could move sideways into this job? Now, if the answer is yes, that would be your best candidate, okay? Because they are far less risky than hiring a stranger. When you hire a stranger, when you canvass the public, okay, despite our best efforts in recruitment and selection, I mean, you really don't know who you're getting. You're taking a chance on whoever it is. You're trusting that your instincts were right about them in the interview process. You're trusting that all the information on their resume is accurate. You're trusting that, you know, there's nothing seriously wrong with them. They're not a psychopath. They're not crazy. You know, like, these are all risks. And, you know, a lot of candidates don't work out for those reasons. Okay. So If there is an internal candidate, there's someone you know working in your organization, someone you perhaps work with, that has been at the organization for several years. They have shown to be qualified. They have shown to be easy to work with. They have shown to be good on a personal level. All their personal traits are there. They're reliable. They're punctual. They're hardworking. They're honest, et cetera, et cetera. You've already verified all of that. So it's less risky to hire that person than to take a chance on a stranger. Okay. So if there is an internal candidate, that's probably who you'd want to go with. Okay. There's other factors too, like you're also promoting your employees. You're making sure that they are rewarded for their years of service, which you could argue is a good thing, certainly from the point of view of the employee. Okay, there's opportunities for advancement, right? Okay, but if the answer is no, then you move on to the third place you look, which is you go to HR, your HR department, or if you're a smaller company, your HR person usually, and you look at their list of recent resumes, their short list of resumes. Is there anyone that has applied for a job here recently that we've interviewed that we thought was good? Maybe they were the runner-up, you know? Is there anyone like that we already have on file? We've already invested the time talking to them and doing background checks and multiple interviews and all that kind of stuff. Okay, is there anyone like that? Now, if there is, you'd probably want to go with them because you've already invested the time and effort and money to check them out and evaluate them. Okay, you've already done the work. So usually when you go through the recruitment and selection process, usually there isn't just one candidate that would be a contender. Usually there's several, and you have to pick one of a short list of people that could all do it. You'd be okay going with any of them, right? The only problem is that you have only one position open, so you can only select one person. But you've got perhaps 5 people that, you know, you'd be okay with, right? They certainly seem qualified. You seem to get along. Everything else checks out. Okay. So we've looked in 3 places so far. First of all, the hiring manager has just checked their own memory. Is there anyone I know that could do this? If the answer is no, they go to their second place, which is there an internal candidate that would be suitable for this? If the answer is no, they got to go to their third place, which is the HR department's short list of resumes. Okay, is there anyone there? If the answer is no, they go to the fourth and final place to find candidates, which is posting the job publicly. Okay, that's the order that people look in when they want to fill a position. Okay, now the reason why posting the job is 4th place out of 4 is because posting a job is expensive. You have to, one way or another, pay for a recruiter to do several things. First of all, they have to draw up a job description. Okay, they have to determine what requirements are needed and so on. They then have to get the salary range approved. They then have to post the job publicly. Usually they post it in multiple places. Okay, then they have to receive the applications, then they have to filter the applications, then they have to bring people in for interviews, then they have to check references, et cetera, et cetera. This is a very expensive process, okay? For each person, it can easily run 50% of that person's first year salary. Okay, so if they're hiring somebody that costs $50,000, that's going to be their compensation, it can easily cost $25,000 to do this. Okay, depending on what industry you're in and how specialized the skills are. Okay, you're paying for somebody's time. So it also takes up the hiring manager's time too. Usually they have an input into this process. They attend a lot of the job interviews. So, I mean, when you add up everybody's time and all the expenses to advertise the job and all this kind of stuff, it's expensive. So the thing is, you don't go to this first. You look in those other 3 places first, okay? And only if the answer is no to all 3 places, then you post the job. Okay, now, just as a side note, you can see how applying for jobs on the hidden market makes sense, because in the very first spot, when the hiring manager thinks, do I know anyone that could do this? If you have done networking and all the stuff that I've recommended in other videos and courses and stuff, you slide right in at the top, right? If you could do the job, a lot of times they'll check you out before going any further. Okay, so anyway, so that's why people tend to go with the internal candidate, all things being equal, if there is one, instead of a stranger when they post it. The internal candidate is much less risky. Okay? And the bottom line is that internal candidate, usually somebody in the organization, whether it's the hiring manager or somebody else, is giving them a personal recommendation. Okay, so if it was your direct report and you were the hiring manager, you would go to them and you know them. So you're giving, like, the personal recommendation is yours. If the internal candidate works for a different manager within your organization, you would go to that manager and say, like, I've got this job opening here. Do you think this person would make sense? And if the other manager says, yes, they're a very good employee, actually, I've relied on them for 5 years and they've done a great job and they're really easy to work with. So yeah, I mean, if that employee is okay with it and you want to do it, I mean, I wouldn't have an objection. So, I mean, that person is giving them a personal recommendation. Somebody that's worked with them for 5 years, that's pretty hard to beat. Okay. In terms of whether the employee is going to work out, that's a good bet. Okay. So this is what's going on. So no matter what's going on with the official process here, it's very, very tempting to go with an internal candidate first. And that's what all hiring managers want to do. These regulations are really kind of forcing their hand and saying, well, I know you might have an internal candidate person that you really want to hire, but you have to look at the outside world first. You have to look at the public. And the problem there is that no matter how good of a candidate you may find, they still will never be able to compete with the internal candidate because the internal candidate has a personal recommendation and presumably several years of working within the organization. They've proved they can cut the mustard. They prove that they're easy to deal with on a personal level. They prove that they are not risky. Okay, so that's the problem with this process. That's the problem that you're up against. Okay, so what's the solution here? What would I recommend? Well, if this was me, this is what I would recommend. Okay, you need to look on the hidden job market. That is my solution, if anybody has noticed, for a variety of imperfections and loopholes in this hiring process. Okay, you need to look on the hidden job market. You have to be proactive to do this. I have explained this extensively in other videos and in my course, my Get Hired course. Okay, but basically, you have to be proactive. What you do is, instead of you waiting for a job posting to show up, okay, and then you apply, instead, you put out feelers to hiring managers that are likely to be looking for people with your skills. Maybe not now, but in the future. Okay, at some point, you target those people. For example, if you are a teacher, now I'm not a teacher in the high school system myself, so I don't know exactly how this works, but I assume that who hires teachers? Well, presumably a principal of a school or a vice principal would be one of the primary people that has a say in who you hire in terms of a teacher. Maybe they might not make the decision on their own, but they certainly would be part of the process, presumably. I'm sure you would know, Mr. X. But if those are the people that are most likely to be able to hire a candidate, okay, then what you need to do is you need to target them and you need to put out feelers to them. This is where things like social networking are amazing. Things like tools like LinkedIn are incredible for this. You can find out who these people are. Say you know a school. You can find out who the principal of the school is. You can send them a message directly. And you can request one popular way of doing this is to request an informational interview. Is to say, hey, my name is Mr. X. I'm a teacher. I'm a consultant, and I would love to get together and get your expert opinion on some of the challenges that you guys face some of the unique challenges that you guys face in your school? Would you be able to spare me half an hour of your time sometime? And you have an informational interview. You have whether it's a phone call or traditionally it would be more of you get together and have a coffee or something, or you just book an appointment. You go down to the school and you have a meeting with the principal in their office. You say like, thank you very much, and then you ask them, so like, what are the biggest challenges you're facing here? Like, where do you see education in this school going in the future? What are some of the biggest problems and what do you see the solutions for? Things like this, you get their take. It's an extremely flattering process when someone contacts you and says, I would love to know what you think about this. And the way they approach you is very disarming. It's very legitimate. And it's a very flattering thing. And a lot of times people will take these meetings. And like I've done hundreds of these meetings with CEOs and that I don't know. It's a lot easier than people think. And, the idea is that you get together and here you are a teacher, or in this case, you're a consultant. Okay. And at some point in the conversation, they're going to say, oh, well, what about you? What brings you here? You say, oh, I'm a consultant. I'm just curious in some of the issues that, schools are facing and, what they see as the future and what they see as the problems and what they see as the potential solutions. I'm interested in a lot of that work. I've helped some schools in the past. Now, the way this works is that let's pretend 2 weeks later, this vice principal or this principal has to hire a consultant. We need a consultant on this. Well, guess who they just talked to? And if you made a good impression, they'll say, hey, I might know someone. And then you jump to the front of the line. And there's many, many advantages of this. This is what I talk about extensively in my course, by the way, but I've done some videos on my YouTube channel that talk about this, okay, about how exactly you go about doing this. And the idea is you just keep doing these. And if you are, say, in a particular location and you've done this over a period of 6 months with all the principals at all the schools in your region, okay, as soon as a consultant job opens up for something that you can do, they'll know of you. You will be sliding in there in position 1. Okay, so the 4 places they look when they want to fill something, the first place is, do they know anyone? Well, bam, you are right in there. So before they look at internal candidates, before they look at, HR, before they look at posting it publicly, bam, they know someone who's awesome, someone who has the initiative to go down and talk to the principal. They're that passionate about their job and they made a very good impression. And they're the only ones that have done this. So they have stood head and shoulders above the crowd. They have distinguished themselves from all the others by being the only one that principal has met in person. Okay, so that would be something. Now, there are many different ways to get a job in the hidden job market. I've just described one. Okay, that is the informational interview method. There are many, many others. You don't actually have to have an interview. You could just put out a broadcast on LinkedIn to all of these people saying, hello, I'm here. I'm awesome at this. I solve this type of problem. If ever you're looking for someone who can solve that type of problem, let me know because I'm interested to work at your school. That's another way. There's many ways of doing this, okay? But the solution is the hidden job market. You don't wait for the job to be posted publicly, by which time they have already found an internal candidate. You slide in there before the internal candidate. And if you don't believe that this can work, do your own research. Go to Google, go and find out how most people get jobs. You will find that most people get jobs not by answering a job ad that's been posted publicly, but most people get a job by networking. Okay, that's the number one vector that people use to get into organizations. Okay, so do your own research on this. I highly encourage you. This is the key to unearthing all kinds of extra job opportunities. It's also the key to overcoming a lot of issues or false assumptions that people might make about you. So this includes anybody who is changing careers, anybody whose career has followed a non-standard path, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So that's what I would say to that. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that answers Mr. X's question. Okay. That's the problem with working in highly regulated industries or highly, how can I put this, highly formal and bureaucratic industries like education, where nobody can really make a decision and initiative is not really, a part of the culture, is that these things can help separate you from the crowd. And they can be your edge that no other candidate has. So hopefully that makes sense. So thank you very much to Mr. X for sending in that question. That was an excellent question. And I got to say, very clearly stated. It's not often I get people that really know how to write properly. And I mean that with the greatest possible respect. The ability to write well is a sign of professionalism and it's a sign of care. So excellent job. Okay. So moving on. Now I received a second question. Okay, that I'm going to answer here. And this, actually, I got this less than 24 hours ago. This was a comment on a YouTube video, and it was left by EGR NHL. So I don't know if that means something. NHL is the National Hockey League. EGR is is it e-gaming? Anyway, EGR NHL says, how does one become a good manager, especially with limited or no experience? That is an excellent question, EGR NHL. If you are applying for a job and there's a management component to the job. Maybe you're a supervisor, or maybe you're actually applying for a full-blown management job where they put you in charge of an operation of some kind. Either you're managing projects like a project manager, or you're managing people like a supervisor, or you're managing a business operation. Okay. This is an excellent, excellent question. And in fact, there is a dearth and a lack of good managers out there. And this has been known. Well, listen, here's the short answer, okay? Now, you guys knew this was coming, okay? But this is one of the reasons I'm taking this question. I have just released my second course called the $100 MBA. And this is, unlike a lot of other business training programs out there, this is an actual MBA. It takes you through the exact same material that you would learn in a 1 or 2 year university degree. You use all the same textbooks. The only difference is that you don't have to go to class, you don't have to do an assignment, and you don't get evaluated. So that means you can do this completely at your own convenience, on your own schedule, and to the depth which you are interested. Okay, but I will say this. If you really, really want to be a good manager, if this is like a long-term goal of yours, okay, you need to know business to be in business. Okay, it's like anything else. Learn your craft. If you want to be an actor, go to drama school. If you want to be in the skill trades, go get a Red Seal certification in something. Go be like a journeyman welder or journeyman electrician. Like, get the industry standard qualifications for whatever it is you want to do, and that will pay off many, many times throughout your career. Okay, it's worth it. If you're serious about doing something, then it's worth it. And the gold standard for being a manager is to get a Master's of Business Administration, MBA. Now, I have a course that offers you this for $100, but the catch is it's not accredited because there's no assignments, and it's only $100, but you do it all yourself. So I can't guarantee that you've read everything and learned everything in depth, but it's there if you want to learn it. So even if you have a passing interest in business and you only care about a specific area of business, this is the way to do it. Okay, it's not dumbed down. It's not simplified. This is the full meal deal. And I use the same textbooks that you use at places like Harvard and other top-notch universities that have great MBA programs the world over. I'm using industry standard textbooks written by the authorities in the respective fields. So I gave a short reply to EGR NHL and I said, here's the link to this course if you're serious. Okay, but further to that, let's talk about this. Okay, that'll teach you the theory. But as you know, and I'm sure a lot of people listening here, you know that there are people with MBAs out there who are complete idiots. Just because you have an MBA doesn't mean that you're automatically great. And the other thing is that it teaches you the theory. It doesn't necessarily teach you the, how can I put this? The personal skills, the communication skills, the collaboration skills. Okay. So I'm going to add to my recommendation of learning business, preferably with my course, plug, by saying two other things. Okay. If you want to be a great manager, the number one thing I would recommend, and this is from my experience, is learn communication skills. Learn how to communicate with people. Okay. Now, the number one thing here is that this sounds so stupid when you say it out loud, but this is super important, is you're going to have to get used to repeating yourself. I came up through operations, and I have an MBA myself, and I've been a CEO, but I came up through operations. I did not come up through sales or anything like that. And in the beginning, earlier on in my career, I had this kind of sort of naive kind of opinion that, I've already stated, I've stated once what I need you guys to do and how this is going to work and what our policy is and blah, 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 blah. I shouldn't have to repeat myself. People should check their emails, or people should listen to me when I talk, or people should be present when we have a meeting, blah, 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 blah. Right? That was a stupid opinion I later learned. Okay, communication skills is number one thing you got to do. And you got to get used to repeating yourself. You have to repeat yourself over and over and over and over again. Okay? Also, there's a little bit more to this than just repeating yourself. You have to understand how to communicate. You have to understand how to verify that somebody has gotten the message and it hasn't been garbled. And you've got to work on your charisma, and you've got to do a whole bunch of sort of soft skills. Okay. So working on that stuff, you don't need to go to school to learn that. You could learn that from YouTube videos and by practicing. Okay. There's a great book written on this. It's kind of a cliche. Most people know it, but it's called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That's a great book. I would recommend that you buy it or borrow it or rent it or whatever, and learn it. It's basically, you got to be really nice. People respond to nice people. Some people are surprised when you say this because they think of authority figures and leaders as, in the military, where they bark out orders and it doesn't matter what people think of them. Yeah, it kind of does, unfortunately. Jobs are voluntary type situations. If you really hate your job, you quit. As we're seeing these days, not that we didn't know this before, but if you treat people like crap, they leave. And they hate it, and they hate you. If you want people to do a good job for you, the first kind of step is to be really nice. Doesn't mean you have to be a pushover. It just means you have to be nice. If someone does something good, tell them they did something good. Excellent job. Okay, so communication is like a really, really important thing. Learn that. There's only a few simple principles you need to know, and then it's a matter of practice. Okay. The other thing, if I was going to give two personal tips to supplement the MBA, number one is communicate. Number two is understanding that people are different from you. Okay, there are many different types of people in this world. And the odds is that most of the people you're going to be thrown together with, they are going to be different from you. Okay, they are going to communicate differently. They're going to have a different learning style. They're going to have a different communication style. They're going to have different ideas of expectations and things like this. Personally, I'm a big fan of the Myers-Briggs type indicator. Okay. Not everybody is. Personally, that's a tool that I have used many, many times. To me, it's been proven to be extremely accurate. I want to put a caveat on that, by the way. in recent years, they've added a bunch of crap to the Myers-Briggs. And in recent years, coincidentally, people have said, well, it doesn't work. Well, actually, it does work. It's just that all the crap that they've added to it recently doesn't work. Okay. I'm going back to the Myers-Briggs like 30 years ago plus. It wasn't trying to predict every last thing about you. It was trying to just give some broad determinations about you. Like, for example, are you an introvert or an extrovert? Things like that. It's not trying to predict down to the nth degree what you're like. It's just giving these broad sort of descriptions. And that works. That's surprisingly accurate. Okay, so, but whatever. I'm not trying to force this on anyone. There's a lot of people that believe in alternative personality tests. That's fine. The point is that most people are not like you. So you've got to understand two things. Number one, it's very, very easy to communicate with and get along with and work together well with people that are just like you. Okay, everybody can do that, right? No matter how bad of a person you are and how primitive your communication skills are, you can usually work well and communicate well with someone who's just like you. Where the real challenge is you having to communicate with or work with someone who's completely not like you. Let's say you're an introvert and they're an extrovert. Okay, let's say you're a very detail-oriented person, very literal, and they're a very intuitive person who doesn't spell things out literally. They just get the gist of what people are saying, and they're surprisingly accurate at that. Okay, so the first realization that everybody needs to make when on their journey to being a good manager is that not everyone is like you. Most people are not like you. And you have to be able to work well with people who are not like you. So now you have to learn about these other different types of people. Okay? People who work in sales, generally speaking, are not the same type of people that work in software development. Okay? They're two completely different types of people. Now, I'm traditionally a person that works in software development. I was a CEO of a small software company, and I used to write code and all that stuff myself, and that's the type of person I was. And the problem is, if you got to go and work in sales, you would be surprised how bad you are at it, And then you see people who work in sales that you've kind of always looked down on, and you see them crushing it, So you have to develop a healthy respect for these different types of people because they all have their strengths in different situations, right? So learning that, just realizing this fact is a huge step on the way to being a great manager, okay? Once you realize this and then you start learning about the different types of people, how to communicate with them, how to get them to stick to a deadline, blah, 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 how to get them to collaborate. Usually the technical people, they're great at deadlines and they're super organized, but try to get them to work with a salesperson and they're useless. Usually it leads to people really not liking each other too. So this is all stuff you got to learn. Okay. So number one, learn to communicate well, be super nice, watch YouTube videos, get the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Number two, realize there's different types of people. Accept this, respect the different types of people. Just because they're not like you, that doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that you have to deal with them in a different way. For example, if you're trying to persuade them, you got to do different things. Okay? That'll be my first two tips. And the last tip I'll say, this is a very short one, is if you're going to be a good manager, remember to commend people. Okay? Hopefully you know what that means. I'm just going to take a sip of Diet Pepsi. The greatest drink of all time. Excuse me. So remember to commend people. One of the things that I didn't learn until later was that, it's very rare that you tell somebody, you know what? You do a fantastic job. I really rely on the good work that you do consistently. Way to go. You should feel very good about yourself. I wish all my employees were just like you. Way to go. People don't usually get that very often. A lot of times people do great work, but it's just sort of taken for granted. Now, I'm not saying you have to give somebody a shower of compliments for every little thing they do. Far from it. But I'm saying every once in a while, just telling somebody that, a boss telling their subordinate that, goes a hell of a long way. The subordinate loves the boss. They want to work there. They want to work for the boss. They want to do a great job. Their morale goes way up, and it's just a thing that takes 10 seconds that costs nothing. Makes a huge difference. That can be the difference from a great employee quitting or staying and being highly motivated. Okay. Remember to commend people for good work. Okay. Don't commend them for average work. Don't commend them for bad work. When they do good work, draw attention to it, show appreciation, makes all the difference in the world. Okay. So if you do those things, okay, number one, you actually learn management. You could take my course, or you could go whatever solution works best for you. Okay. And then add to the theory 3 things. Number one, learn how to communicate. Be good at communication. Number 2, realize that not everyone's like you and that you have to respect the different types of people and learn to work with them. And number 3, remember to commend people when they do a great job. Okay, if you do those 4 things, you will be an amazing manager. So hopefully that makes sense. That's to EGR NHL. Thank you so much for the question. I appreciate you guys listening, you guys watching. Thank you so much. And hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Thank you to everyone listening. You guys are awesome. Just as a reminder, I have 2 courses that you should check out if you feel so inclined. The first course is called Get Hired, where I walk you through absolutely everything you need to know to get a job. If you're changing careers or if you're in any kind of special situation, I cover all that stuff. I go much deeper into some of the things I mentioned in this podcast. The other course I have is the $100 MBA. I have just completed that yesterday. I've had several people sign up for it, so thank you very much. If you're interested in learning the material from a master's of business administration, but you don't feel like spending 2 years of your life and 5 figures to do it, you just want the knowledge, but don't really care too much about the qualification, then for $100, my course is for you. The best bang for the buck you're going to get when it comes to this stuff. I also give lots of tips and insights into the various topics that comes from my career being a CEO and an executive and working across 5 industries and blah, 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 blah. So check that out if you're interested. Also, if you want to support the channel on Patreon, that'd be great. I finally put a link to Patreon on my page. And if you're listening on my main channel, The Company's Expert, you can also become a member and you get extra videos. So hopefully that gives you some options. Thank you so much for listening. You guys are awesome. And I will see you in the next episode. Take care.